Next, we're going to move on to our liabilities. So now we've talked about our assets in all its entirety, and now we're going to figure out how to categorize our liabilities. Now, your liabilities won't have that many rules and regulations like we did assets, so we could easily fly through this. Your liabilities are broken down in current and non-current just as well as they would be as an asset, and the same rule applies, except for instead of converting it into cash less than a year on operating cycle, you're actually paying it off, paying a liability less than a year or operating cycle. Okay, and so that's pretty much our rule of thumb. So we have our current liabilities, and those are any liabilities that we are paying off less than a year in operating cycle, and I mean, it could consist of a vast amount of them. Now, there's no particular order with your liabilities, which is good. But just for formality purposes, I like to always introduce my liabilities with the account payable, right? And so any account payable that you're going to pay off less than a year or operating cycle goes here. What about any note payables? If you're paying a note off in the next year or operating cycle, whatever is longer, it will go here too. So a 6-month note will go here. 8-month note, yes. 9-month, 10, yeah. All those notes will go here. Okay? Now, normally speaking, notes payables are long term, but if they specify that it's converting into cash less than that, then it needs to be handled accordingly. Now, we have other payables from accruals that you should already know are current, like interest payable, right? Salaries payable, taxes payable, all of those are automatically current, okay? And there's a particular payable, a current liability that I need to mention, okay? And this current liability is called current maturities, or sometimes it's called current portion. That's what I like to call it, but you can call it anything you want out of those two, but it's current portion of long-term debt. Or we could call it current maturities. Let's call it current maturities. Current maturities of long-term debt. And that would be the category name of that particular liability. So what is this? Well, we know it's a current liability, but how do you create it? Well, you will have long-term liabilities, right? Long-term liabilities are that you expect to pay off in the long term. But portions of that long-term liability you're paying off every year, right? So if you had a 30-year mortgage, you know at least this year you're going to pay off 12 months of that 30-year mortgage, right? Well, what happens is any amount that you're about to pay off within the next 12 months, you remove from the total long-term liability and you place it as a current maturity or long-term debt as a current liability. Okay? Now, another example of that could be when you have a long-term note or you have some type of liability that you're paying off in installments. The key word is installments, okay? So you may have a long-term payable, let's say a 3-year payable for $300,000. Obviously 3 years, that's the key to let us know it's a long-term liability. But the other key is installments. So basically we're going to pay $100,000 every year, okay? And so how would you report that? Right? So let's say a note payable with 3 annual installments. A note payable with 3 annual installments, right? And so for $300,000. So traditionally, we know that this is going to be our long-term liability, but we're going to have to break this down because of the keyword is installments, and you know a portion of it you're paying off in 12 months. So how are we going to do that? We're going to take, let's say, 100,000, right? And we have 200,000. And 100,000 is going to be considered a current liability. And it's going to be called current, under the category current maturity of long-term debt. Current maturities of long-term debt. Okay. Now, $200,000. You know that's going to be a long-term liability, and it's going to just be considered a note payable. Okay. And so this is how you handle breaking down current maturities of long-term debt. So it's long-term debt, but if any portion that they tell you that you're paying within 12 months, you need to take it out, and it needs to be going here as a current liability. All right? And that's pretty much all of the liabilities that we're talking about in terms of current liabilities. Okay? And so what I'm going to do is move forward to the long-term liabilities. Again, long-term liabilities, easy said, is everything that doesn't fall in this category. So that's going to be simply your bonds payables, mortgage payables, and those long-term note payables, right? And so those are pretty much going to be your liabilities, your long-term liabilities. And so that's the order in which you're going to structure your liabilities in general for your balance sheet.